I'm Pastor Chad Bresson, and this is Rhythms of Grace for this Tuesday. And here on this channel, I am Brad's brother, and I am your guest. Thank you for allowing me to participate with you at Nature Coast with Rhythms of Grace. I hope you've had a great Tuesday. I've had a good Tuesday. It's been one of those days after. It's interesting. Anytime we have one of these national championship games, it feels like the next day, if you're in Indiana, the next day is a holiday, right? But for a lot of us, we spend the rest of the next day trying to just kind of recalibrate everything. That's the way today's been. It's been great. Have had a bunch of great conversations. So I hope you've had a really, really good day. And I do want to talk about something that happened last night. Right after the football game ended, it was a great game, one of those thrillers. It's an instant classic, and Indiana beat Miami, and I know there's probably some Hurricane fans there at Nature Coast, so I want to tread carefully on this. But right after the game, there was something happening, and it really did. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about this. Right after the game, the winning coach, Cignetti, he looks at the camera, and of course, you always have to talk to the winning coach. And the graffiti's still coming down. The report is there. Coach, Cignetti's not always like super excited, but for last night for him, he actually smiled, which is kind of interesting. But along the way, talking about the things that happened and how proud he was of his quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, who was the Heisman Trophy winner, who's considered the best college football player in the land. Curt Cignetti says, yeah, he did great. I'm proud of him. He really took a beating. And he said that like a couple of times. And the way he said it, I'm sitting there thinking, if I'm one of the offensive linemen, I'm thinking, is he throwing us under the bus? Like the quarterback, Mendoza, and he was. In fact, they showed his arm. That happened after the game, too. Looked at his arm. His arm was all bloodied and bruised. He actually had a bloody lip at one point. I mean, he really did take a beating. But Cignetti's saying, yes, our quarterback took a beating. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, okay. Let's hope that the linemen don't think that they're being thrown under the bus for the quarterback getting hit so many times. But here's the funny thing, okay? This was the funny thing. Maybe 10 or 15 seconds after that interview's over, of course, they're going to go talk to the winning quarterback. And, of course, he's the Heisman Trophy winner, Fernando Mendoza. And they're asking him, one of the best plays you've ever seen in college football happened last night, too. With about 9 minutes left in the game. Mendoza scored a touchdown. It was a fabulous play. Again, it's a play that if you're a college football fan, you'll never forget the play. I mean, it was an amazing play. But they're asking him about that play, and they're asking about his game. Mendoza says, my offensive line played a perfect game. Now, he has not been privy to what coach is saying. He's somewhere else. So they're on like two different parts of the field, having two conversations, one right after the other. One says, man, that guy got hit. I'm proud of him. He did great. The other one's like, oh, they played a perfect game. Man, my offensive line, I want to give kudos to them. They were perfect. So who's right? Coach is saying one thing, and the coach is probably closer to reality than the winning quarterback, right? But the quarterback, he's wanting to make sure that, and again, on that specific play, the offensive line, the guys that are blocking for him, did their job. And yeah, he got hit. He got hammered. That's what made part of the play. That was part of just how great that play was. He got hammered, but he still scored the touchdown. But you got two competing ideas about the same game, same team, two different voices. And I'm sitting there thinking, hey, this is life, okay? All of life is like this. This happens all the time. We live in a world where everybody's got a take. We live in a world with competing takes, different voices telling us different things, and all of a sudden we're just like, who's right? And of course, in this instance, somebody's trying to get hold of me. You'd think I'd learn to turn this down before I started. But anyway, competing voices, differing takes, who's right? And I want to know who's right. And how do we know what's right with the competing takes? And if you spend any time online, all you have to do is look at your screen, and there's at least 2 or 3 big national stories in which completely different takes about what's happening and what's going on. Who's right? How do I know? Pull this into life in general, and you and I both know that we got competing takes and we have differing voices going on. And the voices are saying one thing, conflicting truths. In fact, one of the voices, some of the loudest voices, are trying to get me to think in ways that are not helpful. But in the heat of the moment, I may not know that. And here's the thing, not only are we living in a world that's noisy, the noise is confusing. Everybody wants to disciple you. Everybody wants not only to be heard, but to be accepted, they want to be your discipler. We want you to follow what we're saying. And then there's this. Every voice seems to be wanting me to be angry. Angry. And it goes something along like, here's the other thing too. If you're part of Christian social media, it doesn't have to be Christian social media. You could be part of Nature Coast, right? You could be a church, and you got these competing voices going on. But a lot of the voices want me to be angry. And you know what it's coupled with? You know what it's combined with? It comes loaded with. If you were biblical, if you're thinking biblically about this, you'd be angry. That's what we're told. You'd be angry all the time. You'd be angry about sin. You know, Sunday, we began a series here at the Table Church here in Deep South Texas on God Speaks. In fact, it started 2 weeks ago. From 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17, verses that are familiar to many of us. St. Paul spends the first few verses 10 through 13 in chapter 3, talking about how bad the world is. And you know what he's not doing? He's not telling Timothy to get angry. He says all scripture is God-breathed. He takes Timothy back to the source. He takes Timothy, the voice that's cutting through all the noise. And then at the very end of this entire passage, this voice that he wants Timothy to listen to is being aimed at Timothy's neighbor. So that the man of God, so that you would be thoroughly equipped for good works. And those good works are for the neighbor. Your neighbor. So what's cutting through the noise? You live in a really, really bad world, Timothy. I live in a bad world. There's persecution. There's imposters. There's people that are, there's fake newsers that are pastors that are giving people a bunch of junk. He never says, get angry. He never says, Timothy, you know what? In this bad world, when there's people deceiving, you need to get engaged in the culture wars. He doesn't say that. You know what he says? Here's God's voice. Here's God's voice for you. Here's God's voice for your neighbor. And who is my neighbor? That's the question that the young lawyer asked Jesus at one point. Who's my neighbor? You know what you know who the neighbor is? And this is how we define neighbor at the table. The neighbor, and I'm going to quote this because I got to get this right, because I say this all the time, and so often I don't even have to look at it, but I'm going to look at it here just so you hear it. Neighbor is the person who doesn't look like me, sound like me, spend like me, think like me, and yes, neighbor is the person who doesn't vote like me. God's voice that's cutting through the noise on our behalf, for us, to give us life, to give us salvation, to give us forgiveness, is doing that so that we are equipped to do good for the person who didn't vote like me, who doesn't spend like me, who doesn't sound like me, who doesn't think like me, who doesn't look like me. That's our neighbor. And that's God's voice. God's voice that comes to us in word and sacrament, God's voice that comes to us through his word for us, for our salvation, for our neighbor, cutting through the noise. That's the voice that is up against and over against all the other competing voices. So we don't have to be confused about who's right, who's wrong. We know God's voice is right when he's talking to us about our salvation, about our forgiveness, about our neighbor. That's all we need to know. That's it. That's our rhythms of grace. And you want to know why that's a rhythms of grace? Because all scripture is God-breathed. That's God's voice. All scripture is God's voice for you. That's grace. That's grace. And God's voice is always with us in his love. He's constantly reminding us about his grace and his love in his word, through his word, through a preached word, through the sacrament, through his people. It's all over. It's there. And you know what? He's doing that so that we're equipped to do good works for our neighbor, so that our neighbor comes to experience and understand rhythms of grace. Hope you're having a great evening, a great Tuesday evening. And until next time, remember this, that Jesus unconditionally, unstoppably, and absolutely loves you. He always, always has you.